Okay, I think I can tell what you're thinking. Out of all the topics to go out there and talk about, out of all the different conversation points, we can talk about the RFAs, the UFAs, what was good, what was bad. We already did talk about what was bad. We can talk about so many things when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, but when it comes to the individual player breakdowns, I wanted to start off with none other than Vancouver's $11.6 million boy, Elias Pettersson. Because when it comes to Pettersson and the way that he performed in this year's 2024 Stanley Cup Playoffs, it, quite frankly, just was not good enough. And that is like the worst thing to go out there and open up a video with. Oh yeah, we're talking about this guy. By the way, he wasn't good enough. But I don't think anybody is going to necessarily go out there and disagree. Part of the reason I'm making this video at this time is because over the past 24 hours, we've been seeing a lot, or not 24 hours, I mean, they just lost barely, what, 20 hours ago, 19 hours ago, something like that. So over the past evening, we'll just say, and this morning and this afternoon, we started to see a lot of people posting about Elias Pettersson and bringing up different conversation points that I wanted to kind of respond to, break down, and just acknowledge here on this YouTube channel. Because, of course, Elias Pettersson is supposed to be the best player on the Vancouver Canucks. Sure, you could say that Hughes or Demko or even Miller could get that label on a night-to-night basis, but when it comes to what should be, Elias Pettersson should be the best player on this team. He's making the most money, by far. He has a boatload of potential, a boatload of expectations, and I've said this a ton over the past few weeks. I'll say this again here. I have very little doubt that over the span of Elias Pettersson's 2032 expiring $11.6 million AAV deal, that Canucks fans are going to be satisfied with it. Like, Pettersson is a good enough player with more potential of growth and years ahead of him that this contract is probably going to be a pretty good one. Like, I don't think anybody's going to complain about it as the years go on. However, right now, in 2023-2024, oh boy, the complaints are justified. But it's not immediate if you just looked at his regular season point production. This year, Elias Pettersson had 89 points in 82 games played. He dipped from the 102-point season he had last year. He said he wanted to best himself from 2023 in 2024, but he only ended up with, 13 fewer points. In the playoffs as well, Elias Pettersson only had 6 points in 13 games, which, as the most expensive, supposedly best forward on the team, that is just not good enough. 1 goal in 13 games. He was looking like a shell of his former self. This was a conversation all throughout the playoffs. And it's a pretty new one at that, because even the last time the Vancouver Canucks made the playoffs in the 2020 bubble, Pettersson was over a point per game in that postseason stretch alone. He was a dominant force, whipping pucks on goal, making beautiful passes out in front to guys like Tanner Pearson. There is a highlight video going around of Elias Pettersson from the 2020 bubble playoffs, and the guy was an absolute maniac. Total difference from what we had seen in this year's worth of play. Now, Pettersson had stretches throughout this 23-24 season where he was one of, if not the best players in the world. At the beginning of the year, he was #1 in points, tied with Miller and Hughes. During the January period, he was first star of the week for a brief moment. Elias Pettersson showed off throughout the 23-24 season why he deserves to be paid $8.6 million until 2032. But that only showed up in bunches, because different parts of Pettersson's 23-24 were filled with extremely disappointing play when you compare to what we know he is capable of. Let's go out there and read this tweet from Cam Robinson. Elias Pettersson wasn't good enough in the playoffs, that's crystal clear, but it didn't begin just then. Post-All-Star break, Elias Pettersson only had 8 goals and 31 points in 46 games. 8 goals in 46 games. Some soul-searching needs to happen this offseason ahead of that massive contract kicking in. And then a bunch of replies here and this tweet go out there and say, okay, lack of effort, lack of whatever, lack of this, lack of that. I'm going to say that when it comes to my perception, just what I'm seeing based off of what I look at on the TV screen when I watch his interviews and when I watch him play, it seems very much like Elias Pettersson, the guy, is engaged, like he himself wants to do well. He cares about the team. You see him celebrating every big Vancouver Canucks goal like it's his own. He is a team player. His heart is in it. It's just, I think like a lot of us fans, he just didn't know himself what was going on. And that was evident in the press conference before Game 5, when he just looked like an absolute mess of a human being, emotionally, when answering questions about what he needs to do to get better and how he can do that. So Cam does have a point here that Pettersson's dry spell extends far past the beginning of the playoffs and goes even further back to February, but still, this is supposed to be one of the best players on the team. You're paid $11.6 million a year, not to go through slumps, but to be the version of Pettersson that we saw whipping pucks on goal in the playoffs in 2020, outscoring competition like crazy, multiple multi-point games in a row, like we had seen in January and at the beginning of the season. Pettersson had 25 points in his first 14 games of the year. Just look at this stint. Multiple 3-point games, a 4-point game, multi-double point games in a row. He was a monster to kick off the season. But as the year went on, he kind of faded away. Another tweet went out there and said this: as someone who likes Pettersson and wants him to succeed and bounce back, based on what we saw this year and in the playoffs, his demeanor, interviews, perceived attitude, and play, Best Mode says, I don't think Pettersson should have an A on his sweater next year. Port Alberni Sanders says, yeah, I agree, and this is as a huge Pettersson guy. I'm sure you could sell it to him as being about focus and having to talk to the media. And that's one of the things as well, like Pettersson's attitude, his demeanor, it's never really been like, you know, super Henrik Sedin prime, always saying the right things at the best possible time kind of attitude. Like, Pettersson is a snarky, kind of sly interview. He has unexpectedly enlightening answers to certain questions, but he doesn't really do the cookie-cutter stuff. He's not a Bo Horvat. He doesn't do the Henrik Sedin. And with the way that it was very clear that he was affected by his play and his lack of production, you could make that debate that maybe the A just isn't really something that's suited for Pettersson. Who really knows? I mean, this was a guy who at some point earlier this year, last year even, people were debating should he have the captaincy after Bo Horvat got traded. Quinn Hughes is looking like an absolute gem in that respect, but for Petey, this is one of the things where you have to start thinking, okay, what other avenues can you explore if you wanted to give Pettersson the best environment to be a better player? You can make the same argument as we made earlier too. Hey, the guy's making $11.6 million. If he has an A on his sweater or not, it shouldn't dictate whether or not he's able to perform well. And perform well, indeed, because we did have ourselves this tweet that also went kind of viral from Yams, Maple Glazed on Twitter. This had 15,000 views and it made its way across my timeline. Playoff Elias Pettersson. And included is a picture of Mitch Marner. Oh my goodness, dude. If Elias Pettersson's reputation gets to that of Mitch Marner territory, where all of a sudden he gets this rep for being a non-existent ghost of a playoff performer, then okay, that feels like it might be worst case scenario in regards to Pettersson and his overall view. I don't think Canucks fans will go that far. Like, Mitch Marner is in a different level of playoff disappointment, especially after years and years and years of the Toronto Maple Leafs doing what they've done. So I don't think Petey is there yet, but to even make that comparison kind of speaks volumes as to how poorly Elias Pettersson performed compared to what we believe he is capable of. Like, the Game 5 that he played against Edmonton, fantastic. He was checking guys, he was getting involved, he was making plays, he tipped the puck on goal and then eventually got the Miller rebound, which is what ended up winning Game 5. Even in Game 6, Pettersson set up Höglander for that 5v5 goal in front. He had looked a little bit better towards the end of the series, but all in all, the X factor to be able to take over a game like he did in St. Louis in 2020, in some of these games against Minnesota in 2020, Petey just did not exhibit those skills, and heading into his first year of that $11.6 million contract, we can only hope that a similar thing happens to Petey like what happened to JT Miller heading into his current $8 million deal. Because Miller, when he signed the contract, a lot of people were kind of questioning, okay, wait a minute, why? Like, the team is prioritizing an older JT over Bo Horvat. Are they serious? What are they doing here? Well, guess what? 23-24 is the very first year that JT Miller is getting paid $8 million a year. and he just put up 100 points and was a point-per-game guy in the playoffs. You could say Miller was a bit disappointing towards the end there too, but still, he resurged after getting the dollar amount paid out. So hopefully Petey can do something similar, but for now I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about the disappointing Pettersson performance this year. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.